Thank you very much for joining this panel, the last session of the day. I hope you still have some good energy. We are here today going to talk about a very interesting topic about CDN optimization. So trying to have an overview of what's going on right now in the CDN industry, where are we going, what are the biggest challenges. A lot of progress and cost optimization have been made over the past few years, and we have a great panel here of people that have been working for a long time in different areas where the CDN industry can bring their lights on the different topics. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Pierre-Louis, CEO and co-founder at Streamroot. Company has been founded about 4 years ago and working around peer-to-peer CDN optimization. Here we have with us, so Rob Roskin on the left, principal solution architect at Level 3, now CenturyLink, with the change of colors last year. Dak Schenker, who is the principal video software engineer at CBS, so knows a lot about video delivery and CDN at scale. Be very interesting to talk about it. Dom Robinson here, who has a lot of different experience and contributing a lot of talking about these kind of topics for the past 10, 20 years. And also some pretty interesting experiences on like multicast CDN experience in the past. Jason from Streaming Video Alliance, again, a lot of background in the CDN industry and now leading the trend on what are the main topics that we should talk about this in this industry, including the CDN space. And Damien Lucas here, CTO and co-founder at Anivia, developing a lot of technology in the video workflow from the encoding to the CDN on-prem too. So different approach of the CDN. What I would like to start is to perhaps give an overview of the view of on the current status of the CDN architecture. So perhaps I'd like to start with you, Dak. As you the one actually building, I mean not building, but implementing CDN at CBS, and we'd be curious to know a little bit more what you plan today, what are the main challenges that you're facing, what's the technology that you're basically using and planning on using.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Zach Schenker, Principal Video Engineer at CBS. Working on the Central Video Technology Group, where we provide video products and services to 25 plus different business units at CBSI that do video. So really, I think for us, the whole CDN delivery space is changing a lot. There's a lot of shift to really starting to focus on and pay attention to quality of experience metrics, to really understand what is the actual end user experience, what are you providing in the wild. I think it's really a mindset shift for a lot of the company as well, of really shifting away from just hey, it looks good, it plays, it works for me, but really looking at what sort of experience are we providing overall for all our real users, and being able to then sort of offer consistent quality of experience at significant scale. So for us, we're for a long time been under exclusive CDN agreements, single CDNs, and now we're really at the start of our sort of journey towards multi-CDN, towards exploring peer-to-peer and other delivery technologies, but both obviously for some of the cost reasons, getting to lower cost of delivery, which I think is particularly important as we start getting into higher frame rate content, 4K content, HDR. All of these sort of new technologies are going to just continue to increase the delivery bandwidth requirements all the time. So, and then it's reliability as well. It's no longer good enough to our customers that that we have an outage or we have problems if a CDN provider has problems. So really, it's providing that improved reliability for all our users.
Thank you. And on the other side, Rob and Damien, like what are you hearing from customer and the challenges that people are talking? What you put on your roadmap because your customers are asking you today? It'd be interesting to see the vendor side of things.
Yeah, just really quickly, I would say Netflix has done a good job of educating the market, but Netflix has its own player, its own network. Netflix is a very different animal than most of these other customers that we were talking about. So I'd say that they've led, and now everybody expects a Netflix-like experience, but without all the cost that Netflix has put in to develop and keep tailoring their experiences. So I think our challenge is to provide that without having as many points of presence and all those types of things that Netflix has for itself.
I think the point of presence is a key question, and what we've seen in the past years, and maybe I'm going to come back when you said that we have software to put on-prem. That used to be true, but now it's unclear what is on-prem, what is actually in the cloud, and so on. A few years ago, it was very easy. Any telco would have their own CDN, and any broadcaster would use a CDN as a service. Now it's kind of much more complicated. We're seeing more and more broadcasters deploying a CDN in different POPs on their own servers, and Netflix is a very good example of that. And we're seeing more and more telcos using some third-party CDN and CDN as a service, either for overflow questions or for just having a simple solution to deploy. So the overall architecture of a CDN is getting more and more complex with a lot of different options. And that's probably the most important part in those, let's say, new CDNs that we're seeing for the past couple of years.
Yeah, thank you. Jason and Dom, I'd love to have your view on that, and from the Streaming Alliance also perspective, if you can perhaps share some of the ongoing project and discussion that you have in the Alliance that might confirm or not the vision and the view of the industry that we're talking today.
Yeah, to something that Damien said. So if you're not aware of it, the Streaming Video Alliance is a sort of a quasi-standards definitions organization that builds specifications around challenges in the streaming video space. So we bring together lots of companies across the video ecosystem to come and build specifications, functional requirements, technical docs to solve those challenges. And then we publish those publicly for the industry to consume and build streaming services that offer a better viewer experience and improve adoption. And so, one of the working groups that we have is called the Open Caching Working Group. And our vision for that group is really to develop a standard way of delivering content across services. So you have, CDNs aren't going away ever. Operator networks, like what Damien kind of talked about, are building their own CDN. So Comcast has deployed its own CDN, right? And it speaks to content owners and says, hey, if you want to deliver a better viewer experience, you can access our 38 million subscribers by getting to caches deep in our last mile. And then content owners themselves are looking at ways to deliver the content directly, right? How do we reach and own our own delivery infrastructure, like a Netflix? And Netflix is weird because it reached an economy of scale where it could form relationships directly with operator networks. So we created this open caching network that's all API based. It's all service level, exposed service levels, so that the caches in the CDN could communicate with the caches in the operator network, could communicate with the content owner's origin. And when you have that sort of seamless delivery, you have a much better experience for the end user because content is being moved around where it should be, and it's not being backhauled over long distances. So we have about, I think, 5 specifications published to date on things like request routing. So whether it's DNS-based or not, we have things like logging and other specifications that have been created. And we're building more in order to create this sort of concept of an open caching network that everyone can plug into. And we don't deal with the business level issues. So we're not about who gets to share and what part of the delivery revenue. We let the participants figure that out amongst themselves. This is purely a technical implementation to improve delivery.
Yeah, no, I certainly see a lot of that, just being more and more critical to the internet now, that there's this shift away from, before all the traffic was HTTP, so every ISP could go and deploy transparent caches in their network, and they certainly were. Now with everything shifting to SSL, TLS, that's no longer an option.
Absolutely.
So for ISP networks to survive with the load on traffic, they either have to build out more external transit or find ways to get content back into those local edge caches in the network.
Yeah, I mean the relationship between CDN and a network operator is contentious, right? Because CDNs terminate on the operator network. They just dump traffic into it. And the operator network is just like, wow, what do I do? I got to manage all this stuff and get it to my end user. And who does the end user get mad at? They don't get mad at the content owner, they get mad at their ISP. So it's a problem that needs to be solved. So we have to have these constituencies working together technologically, as well as on a business level, or delivery is always going to be hampered, and adoption of online video is going to be hampered.
I think there's a period of flux going on as well. I think we've got talking yesterday on some of the panels, I think there's a sort of 12 to 18 month period at the moment where we're waiting to see what the operators are going to actually do in their own environments. You look at most operators have got an SDN NFV strategy going on at some level. They're not looking at CDNs. They're looking at CDN as a use case, but they're looking over the hill at Amazon. They just see Amazon making money hand over fist and offering IaaS, and they're wondering if they can move from just being a layer 2 operator into being an IaaS operator deep at the edge. And that's what MEC is all about in the 5G space and what's going on right down the edge. Who knows if they'll actually deploy? I think, Damien, you said yesterday, who knows if they'll really deploy that far down into the deep edge of the network. But they want the option, because if a CDN turns up and says to an operator, I want to spin up at your masts, they want to say, okay, we'll take your money. And there's also something else going on where I think that the operators have spent a long time watching what the CDNs do in the application layer, because they didn't want to run media servers because it was scary, volatile, changing environment. It's all commoditized down onto HTTP at the moment. They're feeling sort of safe with that, but I'm personally a bit cynical. I keep airing this disruptive.
You cynical?
I keep airing this disruptive idea that actually, HTTP is the VHS of streaming. We've had much better streaming protocols in the past, but it's nice and easy for a lazy CDN to just spin up Nginx and shunt HTTP out there.
And cheap.
And cheap, yeah. But it's not necessarily going to scale us beyond those 5 million simultaneous streams. And if you want to get to the 50 million watching the whatever sporting event it is, live events, maybe HTTP is not the right opportunity. And so I think there's a sort of hiatus going on at the moment where we see what the telco operator environment is going to be like, and then if they can take money out of the CDNs as customers or just simply compete them out of the market. I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of North American operators and even European operators need to look to China. So I had a presentation yesterday from Riza, the CTO over at Real Networks. Yeah, they're still in business.
Yeah, big in China.
Their codec is huge in China. It is the default codec.
Yeah.
And he gave some details on some of the OTT providers in China, and they're like 240, 280 million subscribers. And it's like, how are they delivering? There's not enough CDN capacity to deliver high bandwidth, high bit rate stuff. How are they doing it? It's a combination of delivery methods.
Real server version 3.
They're using peer-to-peer, combination with multi-CDN, combination with XYZ. So I think there are opportunities for really interesting delivery architectures out there. The North American and European markets just kind of need to start being open to it. Like let's experiment, let's try.
I mean, that leads to my next question on the panel. That's perfect.
Oh, you're welcome.
No, I mean, that's exactly that. Like we've been seeing a lot of technologies, and I mean, most of them are pretty old and been out there for a long time. Just hasn't really been implemented, except sometimes in China or some region of the world. Talking about like multi-CDN, obviously now it's the standard, even in Europe and in the US. But having really smart load balancing and not just something that's saying, hey, I pay this CDN less than the other one, so I'm going to push this one first and then the other one, like really smart one. And peer-to-peer and multicast and other things. So what, in your opinion, you've seen some really smart like architecture, or when you would like to, what's your view on that? And like perhaps give some examples of smart architecture combining these things. Zach, what are you looking
Sure.
at today?
I'm letting the
I need to
smart
pick
technical
one.
people talk about
I
that
need
one.
to pick one.
Absolutely. I think it's an area where that there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of companies doing solutions. A lot of people building out things themselves. We've looked at things like CDNs, like Deliver, and a number of other options out there. And I think really the way I sort of see a lot of these things is you need that intelligence in how you route to different CDNs, or how you decide when peer-to-peer is the right solution to mix in. As I was saying before, like I think that optimizing for that quality of experience for us is still kind of key above a lot of the other factors. So it's really to know, say, which CDN we want to route to. We need a lot of data about what's actually going on with the internet, what's going on with ISPs, with the networks, so that we have some idea at the start of a stream, or even mid-playback during a stream, what really is likely to be the optimal CDN for each user. And then as network conditions change over time, and as you run very large scale events, you may affect the internet in some regions. You may break some of the internet, or break CDNs in certain regions, or ISPs in different regions. I think you need a way to be reactive to that, and to be able to dynamically shift around the traffic so that you're not impacting your users.
I think that's perfectly true, and I also agree with Jason. At some point, what we are experiencing at the moment is a lot of those operators, they are extremely cautious with the new technologies to put on their network. Mm-hmm. Because it's easy to actually put a whole part of the network down with the amount of traffic that we're talking about. Mm. So there are plenty of absolutely great technology to be deployed. CDN load balancing is one. I think multicast APR, and that's going back to multicast world. I'm pretty sure that Don would like that. But very few operators actually did try to deploy multicast APR.
Yeah.
Very few of them. But the technology is there. We know what would be the economy at scale. But those operators are very cautious in deploying those new technologies.
Do you have any idea why? That would be interesting. See, why are they so cautious about it compared to sometimes China? Like Dom said.
I can give you a little bit of prehistory from, so you guys might not be aware, but I ran a CDN from 2000 to 2009, which was predicated on delivering multicast into the subscriber networks. It was a bit of a harebrained plan, but we tried to get, at times we had about 15% of our traffic going over multicast, and it allowed us as a small company to compete with some very big lines, specifically in that live space, because it gives you a lot of profit. But there was an going back to the title of the session, there was an interesting economic problem which we didn't foresee, which is that actually inefficiency often means money to somebody. And once you turn round to an ISP and says, guess what, if we can get this multicast flowing over your network, we're going to give you one 4 megabit feed, and then all your your 100,000 subscribers are going to be able to watch this one 4 megabit feed across your network, and it'll impact your network like one 4 megabit feed does. And they were saying, we were about to sell you 100,000 4 megabit feeds for all that unicasting. We don't want to cut the peering, so actually we're going to turn off that multicast peering and force you onto unicast peering. And then the telcos would go to market saying, our networks are all out of capacity and so on, and that's their own fault. It's their own inability to actually use a routing and do stuff at layer 2 and layer 3 and push it all up into layer 4 because it makes them money. So it was swimming against the grain, and it was hard work, but frankly it was hard work. And when everything moved to Flash and HTTP and TCP, that was the end of that game really. It makes it difficult to get those efficiencies. But it is possible for the telcos and some parts of the CDNs, certainly the operator CDNs, to give their network engineers a kick and go and look at the network protocols and actually do things very efficiently without anything in the application layer, much cheaper. I haven't met a telco that's heard of my favorite acronym, BIR, Bit Indexed Explicit Replication, which is it's been in development for about 8 years. One of the Cisco leads has been leading that, but he's had trouble getting traction even in Cisco. But it's fantastic. It sorts out multicast peering, handoff between networks. But I'd be surprised if anyone here has heard of BIER. before. So.
Oh, well, I mean, look at LTEB, right? What happened with that?
Well,
I mean,
I think that's still waiting for MEC. There's
maybe.
a lot of acronyms in one go here, guys.
If you got a bingo card and somebody else out bingo, we got a prize.
But I think LTE broadcast will come off the back of MEC.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Potentially, and that's definitely those are true factors. Another factor that we've seen that makes those operators very cautious is that it's really seen as broadcast technology in a telco environment, the 5 nines, 6 nines, 7 nines approach. So any technology to actually be deployed at scale in order to handle terabit of traffic, that needs to be tested 10 times before being put on air. And that slowed down a lot the adoption of those new technologies. Whereas if you look at some pure OTT players, and I'm sure the Chinese OTT players, they don't look at testing that 10 times and making sure that they can have 6, 9 availability of the service. They just try, they just go, which is not exactly the approach we've seen with the broadcasters and telecom operators here in the US or in Europe.
No, the whole QoS problem is an issue, right? So as a network operator with subs, I have visibility down to the set-top box, right? So I know when there's a problem and I can troubleshoot it from my operations center. OTT doesn't have that, right? Unmanaged internet, I have a player, I get my data 5, 10, 15 minutes late. The rebuffering event's already happened to 10,000 people. They're already pissed off and gone. I'll just keep going forward. You know, there's nothing I can do. So that's a problem that needs to be solved in order to, you know, to really replicate the experience from broadcast OTT, and the operators are obviously mixed in with that.
And I think, you know, one of the things that we're seeing as we're getting into multi-CDN as well is, you know, there is a huge fragmentation in the market, you know, between the feature sets of different CDN providers. So, you know, let alone getting into multicast technologies, which there's a lot of differences there and not as many options necessarily as you can go to for CDNs today. So, you know, I think some of the reasoning and direction for us is, you know, just because CDN is starting to become more of a commodity, more of a known quantity, if you can find a standard set of features there to use, if you can, you know, maybe use some of the, you know, lowest bar there, the minimum sort of common threshold of features across CDNs, and, you know, get to a point of really being able to use CDNs where they are performant, where they're going to deliver traffic as you need it to, and focus on, you know, getting them to be very good at delivering the bits, and then really shifting all of, you know, the intelligence and the smarts, at least for video, shifting a lot of, we're certainly heading towards shifting a lot of that back towards origin, you know, doing it in cloud, doing it at origin, and then using CDNs interchangeably in a way to deliver the bits.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, integrating the origin back inside the broadcaster and not on the CDN was one path forward in order to limit the difference between all the different CDNs. But still, I mean, how many CDNs support low latency CMAF at the moment?
Right.
Not all of them. So if you want to have a low latency solution,
I think some of what we're talking about here, though, is culture. I mean, I'm the guy up on the panel from the old world telco. We run a LEC, you know, we dig up the ground and put fiber in. So it's a very different culture. You're not going to find a lot of heavy drinkers working at a church. You're not going to find a lot of, let's just go try something. I'm not going to be cautious about this guy's working at a telco. And, you know, it's going to take the heavy hammer hitting and the losing to get them to kind of spin that out and say, look, we can't take as much time. We can't go this slow. We have to take chances. Things have to break. But when you look at a telco and back to the phone lines and all that kind of stuff, or even why the internet was built, it's all reliability. It's all in case of emergency. And those are the guys that are running these places where we're saying, why won't you go faster? Because when they were doing it, it wasn't important to go fast. It was important to never go down.
Right.
And it's that mind shift that we need to kind of push along.
And I think, you know, OTT is the fidget spinner of the moment in the telco environment. It's really hype. It's really big, but it's actually CDN is what, an $8 billion market, and telecoms. I mean, that's probably your company's expenses budget. You know?
Yeah, I mean, we're mostly a rounding error in our company's budget.
So that leads a lack of sort of real roots innovation
Right.
or motivation, you must fight for innovation budget and
Yes,
space to
exactly.
do that, yeah. But again, I think if things like SD-WAN and SDN and so on start to really make an operational difference and allow you to roll new services internally or open that up for third parties to come in, that will invigorate that market. But that groundwork, that bedrock work in the telco needs to happen to open it up.
We're not there yet. I mean, I'm pretty sure the whole NFV will change definitely the way the CDNs are being built and architecture, and that's going to be a major game changer. But how many telcos currently have the ability to actually deploy a CDN fully NFV?
So it's very funny because the language our company writes in is called Erlang, which it's actually a 30-year-old telecoms programming language designed for making telecoms exchanges highly available, which you can actually port forward to making streaming services, and it looks exactly like SDN, NFV, microservices architecture, very analogous, but because it's had a new name wrapped around it, everyone's kind of, oh, it's new, we've got to be cautious about this.
What's
And so,
old is
you're
new
actually,
again, yeah.
all your network's running using this stuff already, but it's complicated,
Okay, guys, thank you for this overview. I'd like to change a little bit the subject, and I mean, and talking about the big events. So we all talking in this industry about like the Olympics, the World Cup, the Superbowl. This is where really like the internet is really struggling, and the CDN and the telco, everybody all together is struggling to really make it happen at scale. So from both like the vendor side, the broadcaster side, what are the technology? How do you really prepare for the unexpected? And what kind of technology you're looking at today on this area?
Well, on our side at NVIDIA, we see basically at least 3 technologies that can help cope with those traffic peaks. The first one, obviously, is multicast. That's very clear. Second one would be peer-to-peer acceleration that enables, at some point, to cope with a big part of that traffic peak. And the third one is any ability to have overflow, either overflow to CDN services or overflow to actually cache server that could be deployed automatically. Let's say an elastic CDN, whether that's deployed over an NFV infrastructure or whether that's deployed over a public cloud infrastructure. That would be also a solution. And on our side, that's the main 3 solutions that we're seeing, and it's not one or another. The important thing for all those telcos is they usually look at least 2 of those technologies in order to have solutions. And the whole thing is this unexpected.
Yeah.
I mean, most of our customers at the moment, they don't know what to expect from the FIFA World Cup. They don't know what to expect because they know that they can do up to twice more than the previous traffic peak, but maybe it's going to be 5 times more. They just don't know.
I think a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think sort of a lot of the traditional sort of model of how you would go out and buy CDN for a big event is you're having to take a wild stab in the dark at guess and make a bandwidth reservation purchase and just kind of cross your fingers and hope that you've bought enough, or that if you do need more than that somehow there is more available in the network. But I think at least with like multi-CDN as well and being more flexible to add in and out different CDN providers, again, getting back to doing things like common origins, I think enables you to be more flexible as a broadcaster as well, to use the different options that are out there. And maybe it's you only need a couple of CDNs most of the time, but then maybe you add 3 or 4 more on for some of your bigger events, and as well as I think a lot of the other technologies you mentioned are really interesting as well.
I think people often talk quite hypothetically as if one CDN is going to get the global World Cup final distribution, and they sort of have this single point and massive distribution tree.
You've been talking to Akamai again?
Well, no, they're busy doing DDoS these days. They don't do video anymore. But everyone sort of talks as if there's just going to be one always use the old cable term, one super head end, and that's just going to hand it all off down in a big Christmas tree. But that doesn't happen. The rights don't work that way. It's always lots of distributions, lots of Vivix links out to the BBC and another one out to CBS or whoever it is. I'm randomly picking names there, but you know, I think that actually automatically distributes the distribution quite nicely, and you know, unless it's a big news event and there's only one camera there, which is never going to happen. You know, these days, but not with the iPhone and whatever kicking in. I think that does change that need for that supermassive distribution architecture. I think you're going to get that concentration of traffic. I think more of a problem, and I'm sort of looking at the far end of the table here, more of the issue is when somebody forgets that there's an iOS update on the same day as the 15 big events and the big new release of the Netflix show.
And the PlayStation 4
convergence.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the conflux of many things that
And
that's a big problem.
that's what's tied our hands, is that we don't, we as the giant telco running the CDN don't have any real choice but to at least, as step one, overbuild. So we build our network to the point where, oh, you got an extra 12 terabit per second spike on Valve, no problem, we got this. You know, those types of things. And so we kind of built that Christmas, the mall parking lot for Christmas, if you will, and we just built it for that one day when every single car is going to be there, and then half the time it sits, you know, 40% utilized. But knowing that we can't just keep doing that, you know, the economies of scale are going to change. We're going to have to look more at peer-to-peer and other technologies like that, where if the five of us all have the same computers and we're watching the same show, there's no reason we go 200 bit miles for all of us to come and bring back our own copy. So,
can I ask a question? Sorry, I want to ask a question. Has anyone actually load tested the Sodexis and Conviva systems? Has anyone actually, because we used to, 15 years ago.
the royal wedding might have been the last time that there was
15 years ago, I remember the real headache wasn't the distribution, because we had the pipes and everything in place and the servers to do that. It was the fact that quite often the publisher, I can think of a big sports event we did with Sky Sports, they would suddenly, boom, there's the media player up on the webpage, and within a couple of seconds, 20,000 people would suddenly want that stream. And actually, that was the point where everything fell over, was just in managing that routing, which is now, you've got the multi-CDN broker sitting in that gap. And I just wonder, has anyone actually load tested those guys?
No, I mean, not that I've seen officially, but
it's tiny metadata. It shouldn't, by logic, fall over.
They're counting on the cloud, I think, to kind of scale as fast as they need it to, because that certainly was an issue for, you know, it's that first launch of 20,000 people in 1 second.
And you know, I think there's a lot of options that we're looking at in that sort of regard. You know, I think it is about implementing like the systems like Sodexis in a way where it's not a critical failure point. That, you know, if you do start seeing failures and problems there, that, you know, either you're probably doing it on a DNS basis, and you know you can probably update and reroute your DNS, or you know do it with their HTTP API, and then you're just getting back a blob of JSON, and maybe you can start doing some levels of like your own caching on top of it. You know, group it by like ASNs and geos and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of
even their
approaches.
handoff's using a CDN at some level, which is kind of
Well,
curious.
yeah. I mean, this is the thing. Yeah, if you get to that sort of point, can you do some additional level of caching with CDNs to protect services like Sodexis? And you know, I think that's a lot of what we're looking at towards next Super Bowl is really if we are using these sort of systems for multi-CDN steering, is how do we make sure they can scale? How do we protect them? How do we, with every piece of our stack now, it's the question of how do we have failover? And then we also get to the sort of point of how do you load test this stuff? How do you get to a point where no traffic that we can really synthetically produce is going to get anywhere close to the sort of levels of traffic that we'll actually get for those few hours on Super Bowl Sunday. So.
And a lot of times when you read in the news, it's like the auth system that went down for a TV everywhere provider or something like that. It's very rarely that the video itself couldn't get there. It's that something in the steps before the video itself. So all of
certainly
that
origin issues, or certainly. So I mean, the thing now with video is I think the stack's becoming so complicated. As we're getting to multi-CDN, we're adding more pieces to make all of this work. We're moving to cloud services, origins, which hey, there's certainly been S3 outages that have caused a lot of people a very bad day. So we're adding DRM into the stack. So that adds another critical failure point in your playback chain. So I think the overall stack is getting more and more complicated.
Yeah.
I think that creates a lot of the stress as well. Is like, okay, if we're now at the point where we have a bunch of CDNs and we have peer-to-peer as part of the overflow as well, maybe that isn't necessarily always going to be the only failure points now. Maybe we also need to make sure everything else in the stack can scale.
Well, it's becoming more like a broadcast environment.
Yes.
That's really what it's about.
Yeah, and definitely I see in your discussion that there's a hard compromise on finding the right solutions and the set of solutions and not over-complexify the infrastructure. Right? Yeah. And I think this is also one of the reason why some of the either broadcasters or ISP are still like kind of trying new technology and like have cold feet on moving forward on some of these things, because complexity and actually having something that is working at scale is still really tough.
Yeah, and I'd say as well, like for us, a big sort of point I'm really pushing on and trying to move us towards at CBS is really this idea of building more self-healing systems, is with having things like Sidexis in place, with having options like peer-to-peer for overflow of traffic, with building all of these components in, you get to a point hopefully where you can build your system in a way that it's going to automatically shift traffic around, that it's not as much about the traditional like broadcast model of eyes on glass in an operations center. I think that's still critical and still important, and a level that as a broadcaster we still have to really be providing that level of service, but we need the right level of operational insights. We need the right things that we can actually do when something goes wrong as well.
So the software all our stuff's quite microservices sort of model, if you like, and there was a streaming forum in London a few months ago. And I mentioned while we were talking that we had an approach that's pretty much analogous to Chaos Monkey approach. Bits randomly fail, and we're all about that, and how quickly you can recover with a sort of target of being able to recover in a GOP. If something fails, that's as good as you can get in video. But I remember this being quite alien to a lot of the people in the audience, the idea that we've got something that's automatically running around our systems, trying to break them all the time. That's actually how we build our software. That's how we engineer. You've got to. There's an expression which I know Adrian will like, which is, you've got to embrace the crash. You're never going to be able to defend against it. It will go wrong at some point. The question is, not how well you do on a good day, but how well you do on a bad day.
Yeah, it's not prevention, it's management.
I think Netflix even has a team internally that is trying to crash any system dynamically.
Software, it randomly just turns off servers or turns off services, and you have to build for that. And if you don't, it's going to go wrong on the day you don't want it to.
And I'm curious, like, how do you staff up or organize while preparing a day like the Super Bowl? Like internally, like, is it like, do you have like many teams up and running, looking at different screens? Like, can you tell us a little bit more about that? I think, like,
yeah, I mean, it's a lot of pieces. It's a lot of planning. It's a lot of preparing. It's really ensuring that you have backups, that you have redundancies, that for every piece of your stack that might fail, what's the alternative there? Where how do you reroute traffic? What systems do you switch over to if something primary fails? Really having the eyes on glass, having the monitoring and the levels that you need to know what's actually going on, and then having the people that know, ideally your systems are reacting to that as much as you can, but then having all the well-practiced drum books, playbooks as well, to know what to do in all these different scenarios. And that will be practiced over and over again during events in the lead up to an event like the Super Bowl. We'll make sure that we're doing rehearsals and mock events, and maybe it does get to a level where we try a lot of these failover scenarios during other events to make sure that we know how to execute them.
Yeah, just to add to that, and you can't just make 7 backups. You can't say, all right, we'll put it on satellite, and we'll put it on fiber, and we'll put it on the internet, and you never get the budget to do it right. So you have to do it and figure out the best cost-effective way while making sure that nothing ever goes down. And that's quite an extra piece to that puzzle.
Maybe to illustrate this mindset shift that we talked about, it's kind of weird to see that at the moment, most of the telcos, and they are getting into a network freeze situation to prepare the FIFA World Cup. So, I mean, a lot of those OTT players, they're running these agile Scrum methodologies and making updates all the time until maybe a couple of hours before the event. But most of the telcos, they are about to enter or maybe already entered into a network freeze because they don't want to touch anything before the FIFA World Cup that starts in a few weeks now. I don't know what's the situation at Central.
Oh yeah, I mean, so end of November to beginning of January, we don't touch the networking. You know, you'd lose too much money on Christmas. You just don't do it. So everything's got to be in by like the 20th of November if you want it to happen. I mean, obviously discarding true emergencies or, you know, CEO level approval changes. Everything else waits.
I think there's also a complication for networks like CenturyLink and so on, which is actually, you know, you look under the hood and you might be using multi-CDN, but they might all be using the same dark fiber from CenturyLink.
Yeah.
That's one of the
It's all great, you know,
you
switch to a pump, the same fiber broke, you know.
That's right.
And I don't think there is enough cross-pollination. I still don't think there's enough cross-pollination between the networks, the telco layer 2 networks and the application layer CDNs. The CDNs talk of themselves like network operators, and they're just, with some exceptions, Limelight I think is an exception.
Yeah, I mean, they're at least wavelength networks, so they're a little different.
I know they are in the managed network space, but there are other network operators, other CDNs which we won't mention, that act like they're network operators, and they haven't got a network.
Right.
Like, that's nuts. That's just hope. That's just hope.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So the last point, I think, before we leave the crowd to go to the happy hour, if we do the same panel 5 years from now, so I'm going to ask you to take some risks, what's going to be the topic? Are we still going to talk about the same thing? There's like any new technology that you really see arriving in the market and changing that, or one of the few that we've been talking that probably going to be adopted at least in certain use case? So I'd like to like go around the table and see like what's your view on doing this panel of streaming media East 2023?
I'll start.
Go for it.
I think we are going to get to the mesh network, the idea that you could get a piece of content from maybe a few hundred places and that it'll be relatively ubiquitous. I don't see storage or compute being the same issue it is now, because while we're going to hit 50 million people, in 5 years there's going to be a lot more compute and a lot more storage availability. I see our CDN network moving away from purpose-built boxes that just do caching to almost white label NFV, which is network function virtualization. So whatever needs to happen on the edge will happen on the edge, be that security, bot management, actual caching. You know, there'll be a lot more going on between asking for a packet and receiving it. But it needs to happen just as quickly, if not even faster. And it needs to be where each additional viewer doesn't add cost. And I think those are the two big things that I see happening in 5 years.
Yeah, so a couple things. One is I think we'll be talking a lot more about protocol optimization. So we're starting to talk about it now, and you know, it's funny, right? We solved the low latency streaming problem years ago with, you know, Tom pointed out with RTMP and RTSP, and now we're looking at it again with WebRTC, and we're going backwards.
Yeah.
We're going backwards to solve the same problems we knew we had back then. And so I think we're going to be talking more about that, whether it's, you know, HTTP2 or QUIC, or how do all these things work together to create a truly more efficient delivery mechanism. And then the second thing is really, we're going to be talking a lot about 5G. I think in 5 years, 5G is really going to be sort of, you know, legitimate. Right now, it's operators are, you know, I don't know if I have the money for that yet. I kind of want to implement it a little bit. Let's see what happens. But 5G really promises to revolutionize video delivery. I mean, when you've got significant bandwidth, all of a sudden bit rates are higher, people are happier, network operators are happier. It's still on their managed network. It's I think we're going to be talking a lot about that come 5 years from now.
Yeah, I think a lot of my thoughts are probably in similar areas. You know, I think the protocol optimization side is incredibly interesting. Certainly things like QUIC, I think, could help to really start to move things a lot quicker, because it's shifting a lot of the congestion control algorithms out of the kernel and into user space. So I think the innovation that we're going to see over the next few years there is going to be massive. I think even the numbers already that YouTube have shown, around video with something like Quick is incredibly interesting. So yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting things for me. And then as we talked about earlier, I think getting content closer to the user, having it stored and cached in network, in ISPs closer to the user, and that real sort of getting closer to the last mile is going to keep becoming more and more important as we keep sending higher and higher bitrate streams to users.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be a little provocative, and I'll say that,
Excellent.
in fact, NFV, MEC, and those protocol optimization, in 5 years' time, we're not going to talk about them in such a panel, because that's going to be day-to-day business. And we're going to talk about what's next, what's after that, because we've talked a lot about those technology, and that's what's coming for the next couple of years. But after that, what comes after? Perfectly agree with what was said before, but I think, and there are few research being done in this area in reviewing the whole stack to build content-centric networks. And that, I think those research are very interesting. I'm not sure that it's going to be deployed ever. But the point is, do we really have, with the current stacks that we're using, the IP stack, the HTTP protocol, the wholesale, is that really meant to deliver content? Or are we going to see brand new protocols down from the bottom of the stacks emerge in order to deliver properly video content? I guess so.
I think there might, 5 years time, totally agree. 5G, I think, is a layer 2 transformation. I think that's going to create a new space, if you like, for the development of services. So, yeah, I think something that we might see a change of is I think every single stream will probably spin up its own workflow back to the origin. If I'm really going to stick my neck out, I don't think there'll be a vanilla, standard's not the right, but I don't think we're going to see we're trying to deliver 100,000 of HEVC on MPEG dash, and I think that'll fall away. I think that it'll become so discrete, it'll be per user, and the whole service chain will just be spun up, and where you have branches or nodes and branching points in that tree, the network will split out, and you'll move the service on the fly up and down to those branching points. You won't have this strictly layered architecture. I think the network will be so much more dynamic than I think it's being architected for at the moment. And I think, to drive that, one of the other things, especially on the LTE broadcast scale, I think I've been throwing this as a last slide in lots of presentations the last couple of years. I predict that the eSIM will appear in the big TVs. And when you turn your TV on, you're going to have, alongside your cable and your DTT operator, your mobile operators are going to start to move into that space. They've got big subscriber management relationships. They're perfectly positioned to start billing on-demand content and premium content. And I think they're going to want to stop being mere conduit and start getting heavily involved in the network relationship. So someone like BT, I think is, in a lot of ways, is very pioneering. They're full stack. They've really gone for it. They've said, okay, we're a telco, or we're also a subscriber management company who can procure rights and get rights through to the network. So we're just going to be the TV company.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. Thank you for being in this panel, and thank you again to the panelists. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.